building for another episode of Living the Journey. I'm Jenna Goyad Harris.
I'm CJ Sanchez.
And today we're talking about motivation, and who better to have that conversation with than the motivation man himself. We're here with Mark Gallegos. What's up, Mark?
How you doing, guys? First off, I want to tell you guys I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I think it's a really awesome thing. And I'm very honored that you guys chose to have me on the show. Yeah.
Thanks, that means a lot.
Awesome, yeah. So just
tell us about
a
yourself.
little bit about myself. I work currently at DHR Health,
Nice.
Bariatric and Metabolic Institute as a exercise physiologist. I've been in the fitness industry for the last 14 years, personal training the last 2 working at the hospital. I graduated UTRGV with a degree in kinesiology. Emphasis was on health and fitness. Currently, I am working on my master's degree in public health at Lamar University.
Oh, wow, nice.
My capstone project is going to be focused on obesity
Okay.
and really centering on mental health's role and in the emergence of obesity, as well as the potential reemergence as well.
That's so fascinating.
That is really cool. I think the mental health approach to it is a huge thing that we lack here in the Valley, especially with a high obesity rate and high diabetes rate and heart disease. That's exercising and eating healthy is the core of all that, right? But before that, there's a mental aspect of it. So you taking that approach and already having the insight that you do with the hospital, and then researching more and studying the mental health aspect of it, I think that's really, really cool and needed in our area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think that's what I want to talk about, the mindset part of motivation, because I really feel that that's where it's at, and that's what we were talking about a little bit before we started is, you can teach someone how to work out, you can teach them what to eat, but if you're not, if you're not right up here, or if you're not motivated to do it, then all of those tools don't really work. So I'm curious to know about, how your mindset has changed from where you used to be in life, because I saw on your social media page, I was looking you up on Facebook, but I did a little bit of stalking, and one thing that really caught my eye was how you were talking about from January 2020 to about June, you had a certain mindset, which I'll let you talk about, and then from July to now, you've done a 180 in your mind with your life and progress that you've made on yourself. So will you share with us what changed?
Absolutely. So at the turn of the year, after the holidays, my life was falling apart. Really, that's kind of how I explained it, right? I pretty much lost everything that I had built up, the previous years, just kind of personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do a lot of soul searching and self-reflection, and really trying to figure out who I was. And I think a lot of this time during this year, with the whole COVID thing, we were kind of forced to isolate, right?
Yeah.
And I think that isolation, it kind of sparked an interest in me trying to figure out some of the bad things. Sometimes we have to look at ourselves in the mirror. Sometimes we're not always gonna like what we see,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we have to come to terms with that, right? And that's kind of what I did. And then, I had to make a choice, right? Am I going to stay down, or am I going to get up?
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. So when we were talking about different topics that we wanted to cover on the show, motivation was at the top of the list, inspiration. And so my husband, Mark, was like, hey, you should hit up Mark Gallegos for a talk about motivation. And I've known you I don't know, 3-4 years, and we've met before at Shake Express, and we've run into each other at Strong Point, and I've always thought you're super nice and respectful. But when Mark was telling me, hey, contact Mark Gallegos about motivation, I was like, huh? I was like, not that no disrespect, I just didn't know that was what you were about. And so of course I did what any woman that's looking for information about a person does, is they go to Facebook, and I stalked your page, and I was immediately fascinated and struck by your intensity and your motivation. I was watching it in bed, or I was scrolling through while I was in bed, and I wanted to get up and I don't know, go lift weights or go run a marathon or something. Like, that's how much you affected me. And so the energy that you had from when I first met you 3 years ago to the energy that you carry now, it's infectious. Like, I can really feel it. Even when, you know, having our conversations through text, like, I could feel you.
No, absolutely, and I even noticed the difference. You know, I'm a completely different person than I was 6 months ago.
That's so
Even more so than 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And I think what really triggered it was just one day I just said, what do I want to feel like today?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then I started looking for motivational quotes. I found one that kind of caught my eye, and then I just kind of read it out loud.
I think just to echo, you know, I haven't met you prior to. I did my research on social media, but I think that to echo what Jenna said, beyond all that, while there is not the motivation for me, what it was is that it came off very genuine and authentic and sincere, and I feel like that is the type of stuff that, at least from on my end, and for when, you know, Jen and I started talking about even starting this video channel and this podcast, we wanted it to come from that place. So to come across somebody else that's doing it on a different scale, and it being from a place that was for you and now it's helping others, is so relatable to where our journey's going, and like to hear about where yours is leading you to, and what's gotten you to this point is really, really inspiring and motivating on its own. So that's really cool. And earlier, just, you know, you made Jen and I have had this conversation as well. This whole year, I think, has been a forced self-reflection, and I think a lot of the things that I was excited to have this conversation, and even more so that we haven't had one prior to this, and we're documenting it. Is there's so much relatability to what you're saying and what you've experienced, and I think I think everybody's kind of had that reset, or had to do some sort of reset. You know, you're forced. When we're in a place when we're feeling low, and when you know, fear and there's uncertainty, you have to make a decision whether we stay here, or, you know, you wallow in it and let it dig you in a you know, as deep as you want it to, or you rise above it and try to push through it. And I think for me, that's what this has been. Focusing on this and kind of reflecting on the things you want to talk about, and how and what you'd be comfortable with. Like, it's just, that's been my whole, I guess, motivation to want to do this, you know, and so hearing you say that, it's really, really, I'm like, okay, this is still the right thing to do. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And to touch real quick on what you kind of said, I needed to decide, like, who I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Right. And I started to take a look around, observing the world, right? And I wasn't seeing any positivity, right? So if you don't see the positivity, then you got to be the positivity.
Gotta be it.
Right?
I love that.
And so
it.
I created that environment,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the way I see it, there's two environments of positivity, right? There's the internal and there's the external. The internal is the way we think, right? The way we feel, the energy that we put out there. But the external, that's who we surround ourselves with, right? So we got to create the internal, and then the external will just kind of follow.
Absolutely. I think that sounds very familiar. I
Yeah.
think we've said that in some form or another, or in one way, or just experienced that amongst, you know, our friendship. And I think that's so cool that we're all finding that same. That, you know, you mentioned earlier that the time frame you asked, like, when we started having this idea, and you started doing your motivational videos at work around the same time frame, and it's just really cool to see how all these paths align, and how the connection to what we're all going through is something you can find motivation in, that, you know, just on its own.
And like, we were talking about how COVID and being a little bit more isolated than usual has really forced us to look in. I know that I went through my own little excavation process where I disconnected from social media. I took to my journal and, like, I wrote all my feelings away. I really took a deep dive and did a lot of self-inquiry. And so I know that was my process to motivate myself, to believe in myself, to start accomplishing my dreams, which this is one of my dreams. And so I'm curious to know, what are some of your processes? What do you do to motivate yourself?
Okay, so I know your previous episode, you guys talked about like morning rituals and things like that. So it's kind of similar to what you were talking about. So what I do, kind of going back to that, searching for motivational quotes, I'll find one that catches my attention. I'll read it out loud, and then the writer in me, I'll write out my own interpretation, and then I'll read out my own interpretation out loud, and that usually kind of gets me going for the day. And then I'll usually post that up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I get my day going. And that's the way you got to start the day,
Your posts are super motivational, and I also ran across your motivational minute with Mark, and I'm curious to know how that got started. I think what you're doing is amazing for the community, and you're really impacting people. I can see it.
Awesome. So if you guys don't know where to find those videos, you can go to the Facebook page of DHR Health Bariatric and Metabolic Institute. So yeah, it's called the Motivational Minute with Mark. The marketing director, she kind of approached me about maybe making some exercise videos, which I mean, I'm okay with that. Yeah. But like we were talking about, like you can teach somebody how to exercise, but you gotta have to teach them how to want to exercise.
Yeah.
So my suggestion was, well, maybe I should just let me talk. Let me talk in front of the camera. Come up with some type of topic every week, and then just kind of speak to the camera, try to speak to people, and try to relate to people.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you really think about it, like most of us are going through the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
The same struggles, right? And none of us are immune to any of these things. So we just need some type of motivation, even if we need to hear it or read it. The way I see it, whatever you consume, if you consume negativity is going to consume you.
Yeah.
Right? If you consume positivity, you're gonna be consumed. Positivity is gonna consume.
I totally believe in that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think one of the things I want to touch on is, for me, I think one of the reasons I think that approach is my personal opinion on it is why that is so important. I wish I had that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when I've struggled with being overweight the majority of my life, or my like teen and adult, like all through my 20s and stuff. Like a fluctuation of it quite a bit. And about 3 years ago, I've told Jenna before, I've tried everything. I've done all sorts of things, and all of it, I don't care what it is, whether it's a diet pill, a strict diet, surgery, anything, it's not just that. It doesn't end there. It's not. There's more to it than just doing that for whatever period of time, a 6-week, 12-week challenge, a diet, or whatever the case is. It's putting yourself in a mindset of why you're doing it, and then really making a conscious effort to stay with it, to change, to utilize those tools to make a lifestyle change. And I lack that aspect of it, where you would easily set yourself up for failure. You know what I mean? Everything that didn't, even now, I tell Jenna sometimes, I have a issue where I've made the most progress has been this year, since, I guess, noticeable progress. I think it's come in spurts throughout the last 3 years, and then this year, I think I joined a fitness challenge at the beginning of the year, and then COVID happened, and then in the middle of it, and so I kind of fell into a place where I needed to decide what I wanted to do, because I was easily going down the other of just giving up and just letting myself fall into that emotional, like, negativity, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And that, having already started that challenge and already kind of looking at a mindset, a different perspective of it, kind of is what kept me to decide, hey, I need to make a choice right here, like what I'm gonna do. So I turned to Peloton, and I turned to other things where it was just kind of, I didn't realize that I was getting motivated and still stimulating that mindset, that mind reset. Mm-hmm. And it's not done yet. I'm in the process of it, because I still struggle with staying motivated, or not falling into some sort of guilt of something, and then taking steps back. And I think that if having had or I think you guys and your position, whether it be through the bariatric program or whatever the case is, tackling it from that perspective with people is so crucial and so necessary. And if I would have had that ability to look at and have that coaching or have that inspiration, I think I would have definitely done things a lot sooner. But it's all part of the journey. It's
Yeah.
all part of our individual journeys, and that's why I'm so like, I don't know. I feel kind of like this conversation's happening for a reason, you know, type of situation, and I'm really like motivated or really inspired by the fact that that's something that is being implemented down here, and that you're, you know, behind all that. So that's really cool.
I'm glad you mentioned like motivation and not finding motivation. That was actually that was the first video we made for work, and it was about motivation, right? And I was, you know, I hear it all the time, like, oh, I don't have motivation, right? And I always have to remind people, like, we all have motivation. We just have to remind ourselves of that motivation. Right? Like for me, you know, sometimes I don't feel like working out, or I don't want to eat healthy.
Yeah.
Right? So I have to remind myself, okay, well, why did you get into this profession?
The why, right?
Yeah, you know,
Gotta have that why.
for me, I want to be a good example, right?
Yeah.
I want to be a good example to my family, right? The community, right? Like, you know, we talked about, right?
Yeah.
The high obesity rate,
Mhm.
and also patients. You know, I just want to be a good example to them. So that's usually what triggers me to get to do things that maybe I don't necessarily want to do that particular day.
Yeah.
You know, and I've seen a lot of different motivations, right? Some people might be their ability to play with their kids, right? Or their grandkids.
Yeah.
Or even in the case of, you know, bariatric patients, maybe they haven't been able to tie their shoes without assistance for a while, you know, that's motivation. Or maybe to get off of medications, you know, that's another motivation. So we just have to constantly remind ourselves of that motivation, right? Putting it at the forefront of our minds. And that in itself is going to be powerful. It's going to get us to do things.
Do you remember when you had that moment of realizing, like, this is what I want to do, or this is where I'm making an impact?
That's what I want to know. Like, when did you know that this was your path? This is your purpose, right? I feel like it's a purpose because it's
you don't invest. You don't.
I can feel that it is.
The fact that you're continuing your education, that you're writing about it, you know, kind of doing extensive, like, you know, continuing your research into it, is not because you're not, you know, there's a calling for it. There's something, you know, continuing to keep you there.
Okay, so I guess there's two phases when it comes to this whole thing.
Mhm.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So if we go as far back as to when I got into fitness itself, I lacked a lot of confidence growing up, and I found fitness. Right? So I got into fitness, and I felt I felt great. I started to build that confidence, and I was going through a rough time at that point as well. And it was replacing other outlets.
Yeah.
I had gotten into, you know, heavy drinking, stuff like that, going through a lot. A series of deaths, you know, and it culminated with the death of one of my best friends, and that was where my life spiraled out of control. And I was.
How old were you?
It was 21.
Okay.
21.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my life was spiraling out of control, and that was at the crossroads. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I found the gym, you know, and the gym and
Gym
fitness.
saved you.
It replaced the alcohol
Yeah.
as the medication, if you will,
That's
right?
awesome.
So at that point in time, all of a sudden, you know, confidence is there, self-esteem is skyrocketing through the roof. That's when I decided, hey, you know what? I want other people to feel that too,
Yeah.
right? So then I got into personal training and doing things like that. I guess it wasn't until this year though that I really started to feel like I was definitely making an impact. And I think I've always been able to be motivational after I started getting into fitness, but maybe I wasn't really buying in.
Yeah.
100%.
sure.
Well, we were talking about how, you know, maybe during all of this COVID stuff that we've been reflecting on our purpose and our why, and making ourselves look at those shadows inside. You know, do you think that maybe that's what helped you? Like, once you addressed that, you were connecting the dots and seeing, like, you know, maybe all of this is leading me to here. Do you think that had anything to do with it?
Absolutely, 100%. So I think this year, and we talked about it earlier, like I've introduced myself to my own self, right?
I love when he says that. It sounds so romantic, but it's like
It's real.
it's real, and like
Yeah.
you're just
And
like
that's
it's so
why
personal.
I think that's why I get chills. You can't see them, but because we've had this, we've talked about that, like kind of just like, you know, that opportunity to have that moment with yourself, to realize, like, okay, everything else kind of didn't matter, but led to this moment, right? To to have that, like, I don't want to say that aha moment, but it's kind of that moment where you, okay, this didn't work out, or this has gotten me here, and this has been a success, and this, you know, could have been different, but moving forward, like, I want to hone in on this, and I want to make that, you know, I want to take advantage of whatever time I have left and make sure that I'm making some sort of positive impact, you know, and everybody has a different, and that's why, I mean, I don't know, this year, I'm still that person that complains about COVID, like, daily. I hate that certain things can't be done, or that we can't, you know, things just, our outlooks are different, but the silver lining in it has been a different outlook, a forced outlook, a reset, and
Slowing down.
absolutely, and kind of just not taking, you know, realizing that I want a different type of stress, right? Like, I want to stress out about bettering myself and helping others and encouraging and doing better, and not how or what I'm doing, how I'm going to do that. Yeah, you found it, focus on that and continue that path, you know? So that the motivation aspect of things on your end is like, I can't, yeah, that's so cool.
So I think, you know, talking about introducing myself to myself, like, this is the me that I'm always supposed to be, right? So kind of going back to what I said earlier, like, maybe I wasn't buying in, maybe it's because it wasn't completely 100% reality, right? And now that it is, it feels so amazing.
And like you were saying that, so you're working on a book, and and you're telling your mom that you're writing a book, and your mom was like, what have you been waiting for? Like, she knew that this was what you were destined to be. And it's so funny how other people in our lives can see that, like the people that are really close to us and that love us, they know who we're destined to be and who we're meant to be, but a lot of times we get in our own way, right? So
Absolutely.
that-
I think we're our own worst enemy all the time.
for sure.
You know, we are the only ones that limit what we can do.
Yeah.
It's in our own mind, right? Our own limitations reside in our own minds. But yeah, it's I think once that I started to really believe and in myself, and also, okay, this is who I am, then I started to see a lot of good stuff happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even to the point where, you know, just trying to rebuild myself and motivate myself, it's helped motivate other people. To the point where just the other day, you know, one of my friends, you know, she texted me and told me that without even knowing, I inspired somebody that I've never even met.
Isn't that
So
the best
cool.
feeling?
Yeah, so like
So good.
the words that were in my video inspired my friend to inspire somebody else.
That's so
right?
cool.
And that is so rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never felt that before,
Mhm.
you know, and you want to do more of it, right?
Absolutely.
Like you just want to keep doing that, right? And reaching as many people as you can, even if it's just one person.
Well, like when we were messaging each other, I was all fired up to talk to you because I think we both share the vision of knowing that small changes make a big difference, or just affecting one person starts the ripples, and those ripples create waves. And so I'm all about, like, one of the quotes that I'm really passionate about is think local, act global. So it's just a reflection or a metaphor for, you know, let's just do what we can and affect the people that are around us, with the hope that that's going to create bigger change, that's going to take off. And I think that that's what you do so well.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing, like, I think most people, for the most part, like, they want to live positively, right? They want to think positively. They might not know how, right? And they might not know where to start, right? So that's kind of where people like us come into play,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So hey, let me be your starting point, and then let's take it from there.
I think even just having the conversation, and that's where exactly what you said a little while ago, being able to, I guess, you know, not plan on having an impact on somebody, but just it's happened several times with Jenna. It's happening right now. I've had it with a couple of other people since I've had this outlook or this reset, where you're having conversations and they're just so much more meaningful, and they just have so much more depth, and you're able to genuinely connect with somebody, and you can almost, I feel it sometimes within myself, but then sometimes when we've had conversations, I feel like it's happening right now, where you're just kind of like having that, like, whoa, crap, this is like, there's some bigger power going on, you know, or bigger outlook. Those waves are happening, you know, where you kind of, just share that information, and you're helping inspire me. I'm sure Jenna's been inspired already, and
Mhm.
it's kind of just a ripple effect of things, and you're going to continue on to help others. That one person that hopefully listens to this and is just like, okay, cool, or reaches out and picks our brain a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like that, I'm totally up for, and that's been happening, and I'm blessed that people feel comfortable enough to ask and just continue the conversation, and then in turn them doing it to somebody else, kind of like paying it forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You have one person, and then that person's gonna do it to somebody else.
that's a good way to put it.
And also, like, this whole year, like, I started really feeling great from June on, and I just kind of was like, why do I want to hold it for myself, right? That's selfish.
Like you feel like you're gonna
Yeah.
explode. Like I gotta share this with everyone.
Absolutely. So there was an time where somebody very close to me, they lost somebody very close to them, right, due to complications from COVID.
Mhm.
These particular individuals, they weren't an active part of my life at that point in time, but I felt the need to reach out to them because of what they were going through, and also because of how I was feeling.
Yeah.
Right, going back to why am I going to hold it in for myself? So every day I was sending inspirational messages to them directly, right? Not through the social media, but directly to them.
Yeah.
Right, and just yesterday I received a text message and says, you know what, you probably don't realize it, but all your messages have really made an impact, and I'm not crying as much as I was before.
That's so cool.
That's so powerful.
And
That's really cool.
and I mean, that just meant everything to me.
Yeah.
And it just meant that I'm doing the right thing,
Yeah.
and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And like I said, like it would be selfish of me just to want to feel this only me,
Right.
which is kind of what we talked about earlier, right? Where like the Avengers or Justice League, right? Each individual superhero has their own abilities, and they're all trying to reach the same goal,
Right.
Right.
But when they unite, that's when there's a lot more power, right? So it's kind of like you have that you have that mentality.
Avengers.
You got that
Of
mentality.
life.
I got that mentality, right? If we just bring all these different people that have the same mentality,
Absolutely.
what kind of impact can we have, right?
Let's unite.
Yeah.
Well, which is kind of also when
Cheer, can we
Cheers,
cheers to
yes.
that Avengers Unite? Or like, just truly
Yeah,
using
no,
our gifts and our
absolutely.
superpowers.
So when I heard you guys were going to be doing a podcast, and basically kind of the theme of the podcast, it was kind of roughly around the time we started those videos, and I kind of was hoping you guys would invite me on,
Hey,
right?
well, you're our first guest.
No,
so
no, so-
welcome.
Isn't
It's
that
perfect,
crazy?
it's
Like
perfect.
how it all just happened organically.
It's
Like we're all
absolutely
having
perfect.
our separate journeys. Like you're rotating over there, you're rotating, I'm over here, and then like we're all magnetized together, all in the pursuit of
Yeah.
just trying to make this world a better place by just being our best selves. Nothing much more complicated than that. Although it is super complicated.
It's a lot deeper, and I still get so blessed that I have that I have my friendship with Jenna and Mark and now Mark
With a C.
with a C, because it was, I think, at a time where I didn't realize I needed it more than I realize now that it's kind of helped it's part of my reset, and we didn't even plan it. I think I couldn't have guessed that 6 months ago or 7 months ago. That's how long we've known each other.
Mhm. Not that
This
long,
was
yeah.
going to be that powerful, but it was not just, it was not in a superficial way, you know what I mean? It
No.
started in a professional way, or through the chamber and Shake Express, and then immediately, like, I think it took 2 conversations.
It's that.
Yeah, and we knew of each other. We just didn't know each other in depth, but it's really, I see those things as blessings, and I see the same thing happening here, man. So I appreciate you being so open, and then also believing in what we're trying to do, and incorporating your aspect of it, and adding to the value of this. And I don't think this is going to be the only time we have you on this show, because I think that, again, I can't echo enough how important, from somebody that has struggled with obesity and struggled with being overweight, how important it is to have that support, and how important it is to have people that are not looking at it from well, that's just my job. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what I do, because it does, when you do seek help and you do pay for certain things or whatever the case is, you feel like you're just somebody's
Like you're just
doing,
another number.
yeah, like somebody's just doing their job, and it's not, and
Purpose.
yeah, And so I think that you providing that for somebody, for a community that it's just that needs it, you know, whether they realize it at that time or not, because I didn't realize it until I was 32 years old, you know. So that to me, like to hear this, I mean, any way that I could help support that or spread that message or, you know, advocate for it or whatever the case is, I'm 1,000% on board, because that's part of what's helped me without knowing that that's what I was lacking. So knowing that that's here and we're having this conversation is like super crazy cool.
Yeah, so that's like two separate projects going on, right? It's the capstone for the masters, dealing with the mental health issue, and it's linked to obesity. But then there's also the book, right? The side project, right?
Yes.
The personal.
We need to talk about the book.
Absolutely. So
Tell us about it.
So the book, man, I need to get to work.
Dude, it's writing a book. Like, that's kind of crazy, and I imagine it takes hours
So
and time.
I have the prologue done and I have chapter 1 done. So basically the book is going to be an inspirational book. It's about self-reconstruction based on positive energy, inner strength,
That's my vibe.
forward thinking, self-reflection. And it's really just, it's a lot of what I've gone through this whole year, but it's a lot of what I think a lot of people need to hear as well.
Absolutely.
And then it goes back to having a minor in English, right? So writing has been kind of a passion of mine throughout my entire life. And I've gotten jokes like, "Oh, finally you're gonna write your book with friends." Like, is this a real thing, or is it just kind of what you've been talking about for years? I said, no.
So you wanted to write a book for a long time?
In a joking way, I think so. Like, I would just.
No,
kinda,
you say joking,
Yeah.
but really it was probably like buried inside you, and then you started like cleaning out, doing all the excavating, and
So
here it is.
I've always been a deep thinker, and I've always had the ability to articulate in a certain way, and
One of your gifts.
yeah, that and just the passion for what I do, and then the passion for feeling the way I feel now. I gotta put it down on paper,
Yeah.
right? And a cool part of the book is going to be a poem, right? I'm gonna include a poem in there, and the poem is actually me introducing myself to myself.
That's so cool.
And basically putting my arm
So
around
deep.
myself and walking me through life, explaining why things happened and how they built me to the person that I am today.
Dude, that's awesome.
So that's what's going on with the book. So those are the two kind of projects, but I think both would be very beneficial in different ways, right?
Absolutely, 1,000%.
You know, the capstone, just because mental health, it's a serious issue, and it does affect people's
Absolutely.
physical
For sure.
health,
Absolutely.
you know, and
Mental.
And we don't
absolutely.
like to talk about it, and that was one of the things that we when we were, you know, thinking about the direction and the conversations we wanted to have, and that's another topic. I think that's a whole episode on its own. But we don't we kind of shame ourselves or shame others, or kind of there's a negative thing to it when it's not. It doesn't have to be. It's a normal thing that people need to deal with, that people address, and now these days, now more so than ever, you know, you're kind of forced to have that come to terms moment of saying, this is not a healthy mental outlook. You know, this is not healthy for me. This is not healthy for the people around me. And address it, you know, and we get scared too, or we feel like embarrassed or whatnot, but having conversations, and then people like us that.
Well, I think that's why we initially started this
Absolutely.
project, or one of the many reasons, but it was like, let's start conversations that are a little bit uncomfortable, that, you know, we kind of sweep under the rug, or it's taboo to talk about it. And so I think it's important because we're kind of all struggling with some of the same things, but not saying it. So you don't realize that the guy next to you is probably dealing with the same thing when you feel like you're all alone, but that's not so.
Absolutely, and it kind of goes back to earlier I was talking about, you know, drinking and that kind of coping with certain things that I was going through in my life. People do that with food, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's their coping mechanism, outlet. So then maybe they're depressed, they eat, and then they gain weight.
Yeah.
So then they become more depressed because they've gained more weight.
Yeah. It's just
And
like
then
this
they go
vicious
back to the
cycle.
eating,
Vice,
right?
yeah.
And it's cyclical. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the capstone is, how do we break that cycle, right? How do we teach people how to cope with life's challenges, life's struggles, so that they don't resort to the food,
Yeah.
right? Go a different outlet, exercise, kind of like I did,
Yeah,
right? It's basically transferring addictions, right?
Yeah.
Transferring from a negative one to a positive one.
And calling it an addiction is, and like everything else, admitting is the first step.
Facing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, for me, it's kind of, and you can look at it with food, you can look at it with alcohol, drugs. When you can tell somebody, stop doing that, stop drinking. You're gonna get something's gonna happen. You'll get in an accident. Whatever the case is. Same thing with drugs. And the same thing with food. You don't want somebody to get to an unhealthy point where it's unhealthy and
Yeah.
it's threatening. It's life threatening. But it's not somebody's choice at that time. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not purposely trying to get themselves to a point where I might die. And I think that it's almost like the more you kind of push it onto somebody, the more that they turn to that because they feel like, they're filling a void.
It's the approach is wrong,
Yeah.
right? So instead of telling somebody, hey, that's wrong, you shouldn't be doing that, try to figure out why they're doing it.
Yeah.
Or just have that conversation with them and kind of spark the.
Well, because something's got to be going on deep down,
Absolutely.
right?
Mhm.
So if you love that person, right,
Mhm.
whether it's a family member or a friend, just be there for them, right? And you being there for them might lift them up,
Absolutely.
right? It's kind of like we're talking about today, motivation, positivity, right?
Mhm.
If we can push that on other people that are willing to accept it,
Mhm.
they
That's the thing.
might turn and not continue to eat, and you don't even have to tell them, hey, stop eating the way you're eating.
Yeah.
Just by being there for them,
Mhm.
all of a
Yeah.
sudden they've changed their life around.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a lot more powerful, and it's kind of just like everything else. Like kind of like even what you're doing. You're kind of living by example, and and sometimes the best thing to do is just if it's somebody you care about or a friend or just somebody that may need that little extra push or help. Don't just preach, practice it and show them and
Live by example.
you live by example, and you don't have to say anything. You just be, like you said, just being there, having a conversation about anything. But the elephant in the room is something that I think can be just as powerful. You know what I mean? Just living by example and practicing what you preach, not just for one person, but in general, like just what you're doing and what we're all trying to do will have a bigger effect. And that goes back to like what Jenna was saying. You start a little ripple and hopefully it turns into a wave, and that's just what, if you can do that with one person, in my book, and I know Jenna has said this before, and I think that was both our goal. This can die tomorrow, and the fact that that one person, I think that.
Yeah, it's not about how many views or likes,
No.
or like if one person was affected, whether they saw it here or it's because I'm living it
Mhm.
and they saw it and they learned something from it, or they felt inspired by it, they were moved by it, then I feel like my work here is like, this is like, it's done, or not done, like I want to continue to do it, but like I'm doing what I was called to do,
Yeah, absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
I love this conversation.
And I think that's kind of where I feel this in particular, this conversation right now is like beyond us and bigger than all of us, because we've all have have had something in particular this past year, from and dealing with things that have been prior to this year that almost, at least for me, I knew were an issue but didn't admit or address as an issue.
It's
It
just
just kind
that
of.
looking at yourself in the mirror,
Yeah.
right? And realizing the reality of the reflection staring back at you.
Yeah.
Right? And like we were talking about earlier, we're not always gonna like what we see staring back at us.
Scary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dark
exactly. And we have this tendency to want to look away,
Yeah.
right? If we're looking at ourselves in the mirror and having to actually stop and analyze, okay, what are some negative traits that you possess that are limiting where you can go?
Mhm.
We don't want to have to deal with that,
Yeah.
but we have to,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the only way that we're going to grow,
Yeah.
right? That's the only way we're going to expand our horizons and become the people that we want to become, right? Or that we've always been destined to be,
Absolutely.
right? And I think that's the biggest thing that I've taken away from this whole process was having to address, right, things that maybe were negative about myself, right? Coming face to face with them,
Mhm.
figuring out how to correct them.
Mhm.
And this is, I'll be honest with you, this has been the best year of my life. It started out as maybe the worst, and it's becoming the best.
and that's crazy to say, considering everything that's going on around us and around the world with the pandemic, a lot of social injustice issues, you know, politics. I mean, we can name a laundry list of all the things that are bad or negative
Or
right
trigger
now, or
something,
things
yeah.
that are surrounding us right now. But you have found a way to separate yourself from that and still make it the best year of your life. Like,
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing is that we need to learn how to not let it affect us, not let it bother us, not let it control us, right? If we learn how to just deflect all that negativity, that's where we're gonna shine.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna be unstoppable on our path to excellence.
That's not a deep turning point. I don't know what is, and as we start to wrap up, I personally want to thank you for being open-minded to being a part of this, to believing in what Jen and I are trying to do, and then being willing to come on, tell your story and share what you're doing. Because I've said it 3 times during this episode, but I strongly think what you're doing is beyond you, and you're a vessel for something that's going to be bigger than you. And if we can help promote that, and we can help inspire that or push that along in a different, on a bigger scale, count us in.
Yeah,
We're
for
1,000% on board.
Sign me up.
Yeah, and I think that you coming in and talking on motivation and kind of what's been for you. I mean, you're motivated. I'm motivated, right? I'm not even just saying that. Like, I definitely knew that being a part of this, or starting this, was going to be a blessing beyond, what I planned. And having these conversations is proof of that, because I want others to have this conversation. I want others to see this and spark their own conversation. So thank you for that, and thank you for being here with us, and
Well, thank you guys for having me. I
Thank you
really
so much.
enjoyed it, and like I said, it was an honor to be a guest on your guys' show.
And we want you back. Like,
Yes,
this
definitely.
is just one of several conversations that we want to have with
Look,
you.
honestly, I can talk for hours.
we'll have you back. We'll have you back.
So can we.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Mark is the one, my husband Mark, the one that's like, all right, wrap it up. We can keep on going and going and going. But
Well, no, I appreciate it, and thank you guys for tuning in, and we appreciate you guys your continued support. We ask that I'd like you all to, after you watch this, comment something that motivates you. If there's a specific quote or something that you do on a daily or that has motivated you in the past, share it with us. We definitely like to hear from that and can keep this conversation going. So thank you for tuning in with us today, and hope you all have a great week. We'll see you next week with another installment. I guess we'll be at episode 4 at that point.
right, yeah.
So hope you guys can join us, and we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.
Bye, guys.